and our grandkids will have to bear that burden. That amendment was not made in order. I couldn't offer that amendment. We talked last night about the giveaways to the big oil companies and the need to get at those subsidies. The way the bill's written, we can't do it. We can't do it. So it's not so open. I'd like to yield now 2 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Andrews.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 2 minutes.
I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, we do believe that reducing our deficit is one of the ways to instill confidence and create jobs. So, Mr. Speaker, I have a proposal for consideration. We give away $4 billion a year in tax breaks to oil companies. Last week, the former CEO of Shell Oil Company said they don't need these tax breaks anymore because they'd search for the oil anyway. And by the way, these companies made like a 53% profit last year. So here's the proposal I'd like to make. Let's do away with the $4 billion in oil company tax breaks. Let's take 80% of that money and use it to reduce the deficit. And then let's take the remaining 20% of the money and spend it on programs for homeless veterans. There was a report last week that 16% of the homeless in our country are veterans of the military service. This is obviously a condition that's a disgrace to our country and should be stopped. So my proposal under this open rule is that I be permitted to offer an amendment that says let's get rid of the tax breaks for the oil companies, put 80% of the money to reducing the deficit, and spend the other 20% to help the homeless veterans living on the streets of our country. Now, it's my understanding reading this rule that I will not be permitted to offer that amendment. I would yield to anyone on the majority side if they could tell me whether they agree with my interpretation of the rule. Would I be permitted to offer the amendment that I'm proposing on the floor here now? I would yield to the majority.
Yeah, I appreciate the gentleman yielding, and I would, as a newcomer here to the U.S. House of Representatives, I'd certainly defer to the parliamentarian. But I'm encouraging everyone to bring every amendment, Congressman, to the House floor and offer that amendment today for discussion.
Reclaiming my time.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
I would then respectfully ask the gentleman if the majority would then not lodge a point of order when my majority comes to the when my amendment comes.
Yield the gentleman an additional 30 seconds.
And I would
gentleman is recognized for 30 seconds.
I would yield to my friend to respond.
And I would say to the gentleman that it's having an open process and abiding by the rules of the House is critical to getting our work done. And if the rules of the House permit this amendment, I look forward to supporting you on it.
Gentleman from New Jersey has the time.
Reclaiming my time, I would just read the words of our Speaker on opening days when he said to us, "You will always have the right to a robust debate and an open process that allows you to make your case and offer alternatives." Always. I'm not sure if always applies to this rule. I yield back.
Time of the gentleman has expired. Gentleman from Georgia.
I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'd like to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Washington, the distinguished ranking member of the Committee on Appropriations, Mr. Dix.
The gentleman from Washington is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the gentleman, Mr. McGovern, yielding. And I want to stand here today and tell you that we're all worried about the economy. We're all worried about getting people back to work. We have 9% unemployment, but the reality is there are a lot more people who have lost their jobs, who've given up looking, or underemployed. This is the most serious economic problem we've faced since the Great Depression. Now, unfortunately, the choice of the majority is to cut very substantially into programs that are in the domestic accounts and $15 billion from defense. We all understand we have got to get spending under control, and we have to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. We have to look at this oil subsidy issue, which the oil companies even are embarrassed about. But what I worry about here is with this approach, we are going to hurt the economy. We are going to drive unemployment up. We're going to drive the deficit up. And it is counter-cyclical. When you cut this much spending It is going to hurt the fragile recovery, and it's not going to put people back to work. The other side seems to think that by making these cuts, that the private sector is going to say, aha, and invest all kinds of money and create jobs and to offset these cuts. As the majority leader, Democratic leaders just said, there's highly regarded studies out there that show that 800,000 jobs will be lost because of this bill. That will have a major negative impact on the economy. Also, one program that I looked into, and I hope we can fix, is the voucher program for homeless veterans. This has been a program that's been going on for about 3 or 4 years. Homeless veterans can get a voucher and go through their public housing authorities and get a place to live. There are about almost 30,000 people in this program. And the ones that are in it are doing better. Less alcohol, less drugs. They're getting jobs. They're feeling better about themselves. And there is a need, according to General Shinseki, now head of the VA, for another 30,000 of these vouchers. And this money is in the 2012 budget request. It was in the 2010 budget request. And the majority decided to terminate this program. I would hope we could reconsider that. The program is working, and we need another 30,000 of these vouchers. And the most recent data indicates that 10,000, can I have 15 seconds?
There's your 15 seconds.
That 10,000 of these veterans are from the Iraq and Afghanistan war. These are young people coming back who have served their country, and they deserve to have these vouchers if they need them, and we should restore this program. And again, I think we should vote against the rule, vote for the previous question. Thank you.
Time of the gentleman has expired. Gentleman from Georgia.
Mr. Speaker, this time I'm very proud to yield 3 minutes to a true American patriot, a lover of this country, Mr. Steve King from Iowa.
Gentleman from Iowa is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman from Georgia, and I'm very glad to welcome him to the United States Congress. He knows a little about what's going on here around this organism that we live and work and breathe in. And I come to the floor during this rules debate to raise a subject that I think needs to be brought before this Congress, Mr. Speaker, and that's this, that even though this House in H.R. 2, the second priority of the Speaker, voted to repeal Obamacare and sent that bill over to the Senate where it was taken up, and every Republican voted to repeal Obamacare. So every Republican in all the United States Congress has voted to repeal Obamacare. It was bipartisan in this House by the former Speaker's definition. And even though that took place, we did not shut off the funding to Obamacare because in I will say, a legislative sleight of hand, there was written into the Obamacare bill automatic appropriations that just last week we were able to pull those all those pieces out and add them up, and we received a CRS report last Friday that shows that $105.5 billion are automatically triggered for spending that will implement Obamacare whether or not we shut off the funds in this CR going forward. These are automatic appropriations. I believed, and I've seen it for a long time and worked on this thing for ever since mid-last summer, that we need to shut off all funding to Obamacare in every appropriations bill going forward. And we had the assurance that we would have regular order. Well, the regular order that we have is an open rule that closes out an amendment that would shut off the funding that's automatically appropriated by Obamacare. If we'd actually had a full regular order, I could have brought that amendment before a subcommittee of appropriations, asked someone to do that, or the full appropriations committee. And actually, at the request, I followed all of those paths until such time as it wasn't written into the bill, as was shutting off funding to transferring people out of Gitmo, or cutting off the 1099, or the stimulus plan of the president's. All of that is written out in the bill. But nothing is in the bill that allows us to write out the automatic $105 billion, so we're faced with the automatic institutionalization of Obamacare, even while we cut this budget $100 billion. So I went to Rules last night and asked Rules, protect my amendment from a point of order so this House can work its will. But even though I have great respect for all the members of the Rules Committee, and the tone and the tenor of the debate and dialogue in there could not have been better, the Rules Committee declined to do that. I'm here on this floor now asking myself, how do I vote yes on a rule that I so oppose? That's my position, Mr. Speaker. I think that if we fail to act now while we have the maximum amount of leverage and the one of two pieces of must-pass legislation, that's the CR, and also next is the debt ceiling bill. If we don't use one of those two pieces of legislation for leverage to shut off the funding to implement Obamacare, we will have missed our chance. And by the way, every appropriations bill will come to this floor with the same kind of rule that will block out anyone from offering any legislation that will shut off the funding, the automatic appropriations to Obamacare. So as much as it pains me to be standing in this point, I can't figure out how I can vote yes on a rule
Time
that
of the
I so
gentleman has
oppose.
expired.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
Time of the gentleman has expired. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Connolly.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my friend from Iowa. I couldn't sympathize more with him, and I know I will have his support later in opposing a point of order to an amendment I have to restore metro funding here in the National Capital Region and to offset it with some cuts in certain agricultural subsidies. Mr. Speaker, today we debate the rule on the full-year Continuing Appropriations Act for 2011. While I understand and support the need to establish long-term fiscal responsibility, reduce spending, reduce the deficit, and grow the economy, H.R. 1 is not the way. It takes a meat axe to American competitiveness and actually destroys jobs. That's why I introduced the Build America Bonds Now Act, legislation to extend the successful Build America Bonds program, a jobs bill. Creating jobs grows the economy, encourages American innovation, and positions us to remain a global economic leader. During the past 2 years, $4.4 billion from the Recovery Act leveraged $181 billion worth of projects to construct and repair schools, bridges, roads, transit systems in more than 2,270 projects in every state of the Union. According to Moody's Analytics chief economist and John McCain's 2008 presidential campaign advisor, infrastructure investments in the Recovery Act resulted in 8 million new or protected jobs that otherwise would have been lost in 2009 and 2010. By extending the Build America Bonds program, we can do more. I ask my colleagues to oppose this closed rule and support the amendment to bring the Build America Bonds Now to Create Jobs Act to the floor. Let's create jobs. Let's grow the economy. Let's unleash American competitiveness. And I yield back to the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Georgia.
Mr. Speaker, this time I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from the freedom-loving state of Iowa, Mr. Simpson.
Gentleman from
I'm
Idaho.
sorry, Idaho.
That's Idaho. It's close to
Also
Iowa.
love freedom in Iowa.
Gentleman from Idaho is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. It's only about 1,500 miles just due west of Iowa. I appreciate that. First, let's discuss the rule, because we are here debating the rule. This is essentially an open rule. Yes, it does have a requirement for pre-printing, but any member can offer any amendment they want as long as they pre-print it. Now, I understand my colleagues on the other side of the aisle might not like that. It's kind of foreign to them. For the last 4 years, we've had rules come to the floor that were closed. Members didn't have an opportunity to amend it. In fact, if we were under the previous leadership, what we would have here is a closed rule, an hour's debate on this CR, pass it, and it would be done. Members wouldn't have an opportunity to influence the legislation before us. This is part of this majority's promise that we are going to open the process and let the members of Congress, the elected representatives of the people, have a say in how we craft this legislation and how it turns out in the long run. I don't understand, frankly, why the majority would oppose the rule. I can understand their opposition to the underlying bill, but to oppose the rule makes no sense whatsoever. Secondly, the underlying legislation. I rise in support of the underlying legislation. It is tough. The other side of the aisle continues to say all the right things. We've got to make tough decisions. We've got to enforce tough love. We've got to
reduce the deficit. We've got to cut our spending. I hear those words and those phrases by every speaker that's come up, but yet they oppose every effort to try to reduce the spending of the federal government as if it is a drastic reduction in what's going to happen and it's going to destroy our economy and destroy the federal government. Frankly, none of that's true. We know that to balance this budget, and remember, as the gentleman from Iowa did say, we got a $1.65 trillion deficit in this budget. $1.65 trillion. That's on top of the $14 trillion we're already in debt. You have one more minute.
I yield the gentleman an additional 30 seconds.
The gentleman is recognized for 30 seconds.
There is no magic bullet. And we know we can't balance this budget simply by reducing non-security, non-defense spending. But as the saying goes, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. This is that first step. And yes, we have to get after the entitlement programs if we're going to reduce this deficit. Yes, we have to look at all our tax structure if we're going to get after this deficit. But we've got to do what the American people instinctively know is the right thing to do, and that is get back to a balanced budget and quit endangering the future of our children and grandchildren.
Time of the gentleman has expired. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to insert in the record a statement as to why this is not an open rule and about the restrictions that are on members who are wishing to offer amendments.
Without objection, so ordered.
I reserve my time.
Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves his time. The gentleman from Georgia.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from Missouri, Ms. Emerson.
Gentlelady from Missouri is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. I rise not only in strong support of the rule, but also in strong support of the continuing resolution. You know, the American people didn't send us here to pass promises. They didn't ask us to start making tough choices next year. You know, there always is next year. But our effort to rein in the size, scope, and cost of the federal government has got to start right now. This continuing resolution honors our commitment, starting with funding for the remainder of the 2011 fiscal year. As chair of the Financial Services Subcommittee of the Appropriations Committee, I want to say that our financial services section contains a total of $20.4 billion, a $3.8 billion or a 16% reduction from fiscal year 2010 levels, and a reduction of $4.9 billion or 19% from the President's fiscal year 2011 request. Reductions of this magnitude are really challenging but very necessary given the fiscal situation facing the nation. Priority funding in this bill is focused on the most essential programs such as security for the courts, counterterrorism, and financial intelligence operations, as well as drug task forces. Yet other programs can easily achieve the new efficiencies this fiscal environment demands, especially at the Executive Office of the President and the Treasury Department. These agencies should set an example for the rest of the executive branch by realizing significant budget savings. For the IRS, the committee believes the agency can achieve efficiencies and has reduced its funding accordingly. In addition, the bill prohibits the IRS from using CR funding to implement the 1099 provision in the Health Care Reform Act, which would cause great harm to our small businesses. It also requires GSA to become more efficient and eliminates funding for construction or major alterations to federal buildings that have been earmarked in the past by Congress and by the President. Government has to be accountable to the people, and so must government spending. This bill strikes that balance and makes priorities at a time when our Congress and our country must begin to face some very tough choices. I yield back.
Time of the gentlelady has expired. The gentleman from Massachusetts.
I continue to reserve, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentleman from Georgia.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to inquire of my friend if he has any speakers remaining.
I'm the remaining speaker.
All right. Then at this time, Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to yield 2 minutes to the chairman of the Rules Committee, gentleman from California, Mr. Dreyer.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to begin by complimenting my friend. He has an amazing honor. He is able to make history here. We've not been able to find a time that a continuing resolution has been brought to the floor under a modified open rule, under any kind of process like this, and he's done a superb job in managing it. I didn't really see my friend from Worcester say much of anything, so I suspect he did a reasonable job in recognizing that we are making history and that we are going to, for the first time, allow any Democrat or Republican to stand up on this floor and offer an amendment to the appropriations bill that is going to be before us, the continuing resolution. And I think that, Mr. Speaker, it is important for us to recognize that it's not only a new day when it comes to the process in this House for us to consider appropriations bills, but it's a new day in that we have stepped forward and recognized that if we don't get our fiscal house in order and bring about dramatic spending cuts, our future is very much in question. And I say that because people use comparisons to crazy places like Greece and California when they talk about the potential problems that the United States of America faces. And I've got to say that if we don't bring about these kinds of spending cuts, we are going to be passing on to future generations a responsibility that they do not deserve to have. That's why it's up to us to do our job and make sure we get our fiscal house in order. I mean, as the distinguished chair of the Committee on Appropriations, Mr. Rogers, has said so well, the cuts in this bill that are going to be before us are larger than the gross domestic product of 126 countries, 126 countries. And that's why we've got a monumental responsibility and a chance for Democrats and Republicans together to work on this thing. And I'm so pleased to see my friend Norm Dix, the distinguished ranking member in the back of the chamber, already working on his great product that's going to be coming forward as we seek to have the two of us come together as political parties to resolve our nation's challenges. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Time of the gentleman has expired. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
May I inquire, does the gentleman have any further speakers?
Am I lying about you? I'm going to be struck down.
I do not have any further speakers. I'll close.
Mr. Speaker, I will close for our side.
Gentleman is recognized for the balance of the time.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, Democrats very much want to eliminate wasteful spending. We are committed to making the tough choices to get this budget more balanced, to get our deficit reduced, to start paying down the debt. That's not the issue. The issue is, where do you make those cuts? My friends on the other side of the aisle talked about shared sacrifice. Well, the only people that seem to be sacrificing under their approach are middle-income families and the poorest of the poor in our country. A few weeks ago, at their assistance, millionaires and billionaires got an extension of the Bush tax cuts at a cost of billions of dollars in terms of more borrowed money added onto our deficit. So the Donald Trumps of the world are not sacrificing. Big oil is not sacrificing. Just to put it in perspective, that BP, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, ExxonMobil, and Shell make a combined profit of nearly over $1 trillion during this past decade, and yet taxpayers are subsidizing big oil companies. Why? And for all the talk about how open this rule is, we can't come up with an amendment that is germane or that will be made in order to go after these subsidies because they are protected. I mentioned earlier the war. We borrowed $450 billion last year. Our soldiers are sacrificing, their families are sacrificing, and we're not paying for the war. We're just putting it on our credit card. That is unconscionable. And yet an amendment is not eligible to be brought up to insist that we pay for this war. So where do they cut? Education. More than 200,000 kids kicked out of Head Start, and thousands of teachers would lose their jobs. An $800 reduction per student in the maximum Pell Grant Award. Innovation, 20,000 fewer researchers supported the National Science Foundation trying to find a cure to cancer. $1.4 billion reduction in science and energy research to spur clean energy economy of the future. $2.5 billion in cuts to the National Institutes of Health, again, trying to find cures to diseases like cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's. We found a cure to Alzheimer's. We'll never have another problem with Medicaid again. But yet you are cutting back on those important investments. High-speed rail being cut back. A loss of 25,000 construction jobs if your bill becomes law. You're cutting cops and firefighters. And yet we're protecting the very wealthy in this country. We're protecting subsidies to major oil and gas companies. It is just wrong, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to urge my colleagues to defeat the previous question so that I can offer an amendment to the rule to provide that immediately after the House adopts this rule, it will bring up H.R. 11, the Build America Bonds to Create Jobs Now Act. Unlike the irresponsible bill the Republicans want to bring up, which will cut jobs, threaten American innovation, and slash initiatives that create economic growth, this bill will spur job creation here at home by extending through 2012 the successful Build America bonds to help state and local governments finance the rebuilding of American schools and hospitals, water systems, and transit projects at significantly lower costs. It has been calculated that every $1 billion in federal funds invested in infrastructure creates or sustains approximately 35,000 jobs and $6.2 billion in economic activity. Build American bonds are broadly supported by American business, the construction industry, and President Obama, as well as state and local governments. And at a time of fiscal restraint, they are a good deal for the American taxpayer, wisely using small public investments to leverage significant private funds to rebuild America and create jobs. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert the text of the amendment in the record along with extraneous materials immediately prior to the vote on the previous question.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to vote no and defeat the previous question so that we can debate and pass real jobs legislation. The American people want us to talk about jobs and how to create jobs and protect jobs. This will do it. So I urge a no vote on the previous question and a no vote on the rule, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Georgia.
Mr. Speaker, I'll say again, I can't believe that here on my first rule we have an open process. For the first time in the history of this House, as best I can tell, an open process on a continuing resolution. Now, we're only dealing with this continuing resolution because of the mess we were left in last year, and we're doing the very best we can with it. You've heard words like draconian, decimates, slashes. I want to put it in terms that I think we can all understand. I want you to think about it in terms of your family grocery budget, Mr. Speaker. If you went to the grocery store today and bought your groceries for a month, our friends on the other side would have you believe that we want you to fast for an entire day, because that's about what it is. This $100 billion is about one day out of a month's grocery budget. But if you took that 30 days of groceries and you spread those 30 days around, and that's what we do under an open process, we let you spread it around, add where you want to add, cut where you want to cut, spread that around. Can we do that? Can we do that as a very first step towards getting our fiscal house in order? Not only can we do it, Mr. Speaker, we must do it. I'm grateful to the leadership for allowing us to do it. I urge a strong yes vote on the rule. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time and move the previous question.
Gentleman yields back his time. All time has expired. The question is on the previous question on the resolution. As many as are in favor will signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
I ask for the yeas and nays, Mr. Speaker.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. What purpose the gentleman from Georgia rise?
Mr. Speaker, I send to the desk a privileged concurrent resolution and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the concurrent resolution.
House Concurrent Resolution 17. Resolved that when the House adjourns on the legislative day of Thursday, February 17, 2011, Friday, February 18, 2011, or Saturday, February 19, 2011, on a motion offered pursuant to this concurrent resolution by its majority leader or his designee, it stand adjourned until 2 p.m. on Monday, February 28, 2011, or until the time of any reassembly pursuant to Section 2 of this concurrent resolution, whichever occurs first, and that when the Senate recesses or adjourns on any day from Thursday, February 17, 2011, through Friday, February 25, 2011, on a motion offered pursuant to this concurrent resolution by its majority leader or his designee, it stand recessed or adjourned until noon on Monday, February 28, 2011, or such other time on that day as may be specified in the motion to recess or adjourn, or until the time of any reassembly pursuant to Section 2 of this concurrent resolution, whichever occurs first. Section 2, the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader of the Senate, or their respective designees, acting jointly after consultation with the Minority Leader of the House and the Minority Leader of the Senate, shall notify the members of the House and the Senate, respectively, to reassemble at such place and time as they may designate if, in their opinion, the public interest shall warrant it.
The question is on the concurrent resolution. As many as are in favor will signify by saying aye. Those opposed will say no. The noes have it.
Mr. Speaker,
Gentleman from Georgia.
I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present, and I make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, proceedings will resume on questions previously postponed. Votes will be taken in the following order: ordering the previous question on House Resolution 92, adopting House Resolution 92, and adopting House Concurrent Resolution number 17. Okay. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote. Remaining electronic votes will be conducted as a 5-minute vote. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is ordering the previous question on House Resolution 92. Those in favor and vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote.
The U.S. House is going to spend the balance of the rest of the week debating federal spending for the remainder of this fiscal year. That's because the government's been operating on temporary spending since October of 2010. The budget they're debating today, this is H.R. 1 is the bill, will continue through the end of this fiscal year, the end of September. So look for 3 days of debate possible beginning today. They've finished up debate on the rule. The rule would allow for 1 hour of general debate and lots of amendments. Some 400 amendments have been filed. Not all will get votes, but lots of debate ahead in the U.S. House. And we want to give you a chance to give your thoughts on the budget for the rest of the fiscal year, on what should be cut in particular. The numbers to call: for Republicans, it's 202-585-3885. Democrats, 202-585-3886. Independents and others, 202-585-3887. Make sure you mute your television when you call in so you won't feed back. And if you have called in and gotten on the air here at C-SPAN, give others a chance to call in this afternoon. The Republican plan, the proposal, would provide for $1 trillion in general funds through the end of the budget year. That's over $60 billion less than the previous year, and nearly $100 billion less than the President originally requested. Again, for fiscal year 2011. It may get a bit confusing because already the President has released, as of yesterday, his 2012 budget, and lots of committees are looking at that as well. But here on the House, for the next couple of days, they're concerned about fiscal year 2011 because the temporary spending wraps up in March, so they've got to get it done here in the next couple of weeks. Let's go first to our Republican line. Gordon is in Roseville, California.
Yes, sir. I am in favor of drastically or dramatically reducing federal spending. We in our household have had to make significant cuts, and I want to see the federal budget do the same. Thank you.
Next up is Nashville, and Patrice on our Democrats line.
Yes, I was just wondering how much they're going to cut in housing, Section 8 housing, the federal program. I want to know how much they're going to be cutting.
Well, housing is under the Labor HHS section, so let me tell you a little bit about that. In the Labor HHS section, the bill provides for $146 billion in spending. That's 11% less than 2010, and it's 22% less than the President's request. This particular note doesn't have anything about housing in particular, but it does say that it's going to be 50% less than 2010 for community health centers, and 50%, $1 billion less for programs such as Head Start. Next up is Illinois. Greg, go ahead on our independent line.
Yeah. As far as the budget is concerned, I believe that they need to cut it to where it's balanced. I mean, we have been living way beyond our means for so long, and even when it affects each of our personal programs that we like, we have to cut it. It has to be massive in cuts. So I'm in favor of whatever it takes to balance the budget even this year.
The Hill reports in their floor blog that after general debate, when they get to amendments, that the Defense Department, they will start with Defense Department amendments first, and the cuts in defense, or the defense appropriations, I should say, includes $506.2 billion in base funding for defense. That's 3% less than the President's request for 2011, but $8 billion more than the 2010 levels. It also includes nearly $160 billion for operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. Fort Bragg is next. Candace is on our Republican line. Hi there.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thanks.
I wanted to clarify, did I just hear they were going to try to recess the House until February 28th or something?
Well, that's just a procedural move, Candace. What they're doing there is that's the resolution so that the House can wrap up their work at the end of this week, and they will be out next week in what they call their district work period. Yeah, so that's sort of a formal procedure. So when they finish for the week, that they adjourn to come back the week of February 28th.
Okay. What I wanted to say on the budget is we all understand and we all agree that we need to cut money, but I'm at Fort Bragg, and one thing that we think should be on the table to start with is the contractors that are paying 4 times. They're being paid 4 times what we are as soldiers, and you know, that and the federal benefits. Why don't we at least have those on the table too? You know, with all this other the cuts and things that need to be done in domestic spending, Social Security, disability. We need these things looked at because our soldiers are really suffering. You know, I know our household with 2 soldiers,
These are,
you know,
Candace, are these your sons?
No, I'm in the military, and my husband is in the military. And I mean, it's I mean, when we look at these contractors compared to what we are paid, it's ridiculous. I mean, we should cut that money out to them first and worry about paying us, our soldiers, me, my husband. And we do have a son that is in the military. But, I mean, when are we going to face those issues and look after our men and women who serve this country?
Candace, thanks for your opinion. Let's go to Chicago next. Quentin's on our Democrats line as we talk about the 2011 budget and the debate this week in the U.S. House. Hi, Quentin.
Yes, how you doing?
Fine.
I'm doing real good myself.
You're on the air. Just make sure you mute your set and go ahead with your comments.
Okay. I have a comment. I wanted to know if it was possible if we can cut out some of the money that we pay in Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, because I know a lot of people who get Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. I thought that that's what Social Security was for, you know, and like along those lines.
So you'd like to see the payments, the actual payments that go out to people, lowered?
Yeah.
Well, one of the areas that neither this budget nor the president's budget are the areas of sort of Medicare and Social Security. They have not addressed those quite yet. Let's hear from Bruce in Everett, Washington, on our independent line. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. I'm really confused about this thing. Their budget. I mean, the budget got to be balanced and all that, and cuts and stuff. But why do you want to cut from the people from the lowest end of the scale? Why are they rewarding the oil companies that have been scouting money out of people for how many years. Why do they bail out the banks that have been stealing people's homes out from under them? Why don't they make them pay their debt back to the federal government that the federal government squandered on them? As far as health care is concerned, I'm a veteran. I served 26 years in the armed forces, 22 years for pay. I just got my new pay scale for my military, and now I'm paying taxes on that. Instead of getting my $300 and some odd dollars a month, I'll be getting down to $294 a month instead of my $351 minus the tax and stuff.
Well, areas for veterans will be affected by the fiscal year 2011 budget proposal. Again, the overall proposals over $1 trillion. The Republican proposal more than $60 billion less than the previous year, $100 billion less than President Obama requested for 2011. For veterans in the military construction bill, that means $74.2 billion. And that is about 3% less than the fiscal year, 3% less than the President's request for 2011. Next up, Livingston, Kansas, and Martha on our Republican line. And your thoughts on the budget debate?
I am Martha Campbell. I'm 83 years old, widow. I get $770 Social Security after Medicare. I pay my taxes in 4 payments. I do not drive a new car. But let me say this, who makes jobs? The government? No. The rich man all around. Who has more than one car in their 3-car garage? The rich man. Who buys the large new homes? Who buys furniture? Who has a swimming pool put in? Who buys appliances? Who buys clothes? Groceries, daycare, yard work? Who supports the city with property taxes? Who pays county taxes? Who pays school taxes? Who gives money to the libraries and the hospitals with their donations, and high schools and colleges? And who makes jobs that cleans the swimming pool?
And Martha, do you think folks like that, folks in the upper income, are more affected by this budget proposal than lower income folks?
I think the rich man needs to be left alone to spend their money and make jobs.
Let's hear from Eagle, Nebraska, and Paul's on our Democrats line. Paul, you there?
Yes.
Hi, go ahead with your comment.
I'd like to say that I wish the Congress would be more serious about getting here. Let's cut their pay 20%. They're all personally rich anyway. They don't need it, and they want to serve, right? Let them serve free. Cut their pay. And also, I'd like to hear them talk about cutting farm subsidies as well. Farm income has been higher, the highest it's ever been here. So what do they need the subsidies for? They don't need it.
Well, it would be actually under this request, just looking at, there would be a cut in farm assistance programs. They'd receive about 18% less, $366 million. So that's lower than the fiscal year 2010 level. Just a reminder, too, about the budget. We're talking about the fiscal year 2011 budget here on the House floor, and they'll be debating it for the next couple of days with a lot of amendments to be considered. Not all of them will get a vote. But keep in mind, the fiscal year 2012 budget released yesterday by the President and his administration officials testifying on that, including today his Budget Director, Jacob Lew. Later today, testimony from Kathleen Sebelius on Capitol Hill. That'll be at 2:30 Eastern. We'll have coverage of that on C-SPAN 3. And tomorrow, a number of hearings that we'll tell you about as we go along. That include the Armed Services hearing with Secretary Gates and Michael Mullen. Again, they're talking about the 2012 budget, and here in the House, they're dealing with 2011 because the continuing resolution ends in early March and has to be extended through the end of this fiscal year. Dayton, Kentucky is next, and this is Patricia, Republican caller.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi. I think they should cut the budget more. I think they should take $200 billion out. I'm on Social Security. I live on $630 a month. I would be willing to take a cut in my Social Security. I would also be willing to pay more in Medicare. I think everybody should take a cut. I think everybody should pay a little bit more. so we can get it under control.
Why do you think that they haven't considered those cuts in Social Security or Medicare, those so-called non-discretionary areas? They haven't touched those yet.
I think there's probably some fear there. I think they're afraid of how the older people are going to react. But let me tell you, those older people have been through a lot. And I think they're all willing to take a cut. I do.
Well, thanks for your opinion. Let's go to Glenn, who's in Oklahoma. Glenn, what's the name of your town in Oklahoma?
It's Manford.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, pretty much across the board there needs to be cuts. But they need to address the fact that a lot of people who are on Social Security getting very low amounts are barely making their rent payments or mortgage payments. And now on top of this, we hear that they want to do away with the mortgage. Part of it is the mortgage interest.
Well, that's in the that's in the president's proposal for 2012.
Right. Okay. Yeah, there needs to be cuts across the board. I think they ought to really lock these guys in Congress until they can fight this out, rather than taking time off from it. They just are dragging it out longer and longer. It seems like I'm a former Democrat. I was a Democrat for 40 years. I am no longer. I'm an independent right now, trying to make up my mind what I want to go, which way I want to go. I worked formerly for an one of the oil companies in the U.S., and I became disabled after 20-some years of service. Recently, the company dumped me onto Medicare, which added to the cost of the Medicare rolls, because the government allows them to do that. I had private insurance through them. Why are they allowing Medicare to grow?
Glenn, thanks for your comments. I want to get a few more here as the vote winds down. This is a procedural vote ahead of the vote on the rule for debate of H.R. 1. This is the fiscal year 2011 continuing resolution to keep the government funded through the end of the fiscal year. And that'll get an hour of general debate. They won't be locked into the House, but they pretty much will be here the rest of the week debating it, because there are some 400 amendments pending or possible. Not all of those will get a vote, obviously, but lots of debate ahead. And the House likely to finish up work on its part of things in terms of the continuing resolution this week, and then it'll be up to the Senate. And again, they're looking at a March 4th deadline on this. Streamwood, Illinois is next, and Gilbert on our Democrats line.
Yes, hi, how you doing?
Fine.
I would, why can't we just cut what we gave the Republicans, their $80 million or whatever it was for their tax cuts, cut their taxes off, and that should bring down the deficit, wouldn't it?
Is that it, Gilbert? You done?
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for calling. Next up is Monroe, West Monroe, Louisiana, and Sybil, Republican caller.
Okay, thank you. Well, the Republicans have already cut their pay. That man was referring to that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm referring about, jobs. Okay, we would have jobs if Obama would let these companies come in and drill. And they talk about oil companies. If you're not rich, you can't hire people. And we've got to have people on jobs. And if I was in the White House, I would call everything in and let them start working and forget about that EPA.
The bill, the fiscal year 2011 budget does deal with the EPA, and it reduces funding substantially, or proposes to reduce funding substantially for the EPA. Lampasas, Texas, next up. James, go ahead on our independent line.
Okay, I'm first off retired military, and I would go ahead and make this recommendation. Everybody that draws a check from the government, including myself, cut it 3.5%. Everybody else that's working for wages, raise their taxes 3.5%. Everybody bites a bullet. Everybody gets to participate, and it wouldn't take long to run this deficit out of sight. We could correct it. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hear from John in Atlanta. A couple of suggestions there by James in Texas. What did you think of any of those?
Well, just
I'll make a comment on that. But first of all, 1980, the entire federal budget was $500 billion. 10 years later, it was almost double that. 10 years after that, in the year 2000, it was $2 trillion. Now we're pushing $3.7 trillion budget for next year. Wow, I don't know how many American people's incomes have doubled every 10 years for decades now, but I know the federal government has. It's unconscionable. I can't even imagine what the Democrats would say if George Bush introduced a budget with $1.6 trillion in deficit spending. What they need to do, first of all, like the Debt Commission recommend, is totally reform our tax code and do what works historically. 12% unemployment, 1920. I'll make this comment real quick. We had a massive tax rate, 73% tax rates on the upper bracket. The Coolidge came in, dropped them all the way down to 24%, lower on the lower brackets. In 2 years, we had almost full employment, 61% increase in revenues to the government following the massive growth. Ronald Reagan, 83 tax cut. 1 year later, 7.5% growth, 300,000 to 400,000 jobs a month being created. The revenues following that cut in 83 doubled within 6 years. Now, why are they not even talking about this, the Republican leadership? I don't know. They don't know history, and the Democrats definitely don't know history. So.
All right, John, we're going to move on to Michael, who's in Utica, New York, as the vote winds down. John, your thoughts on the budget proposal? Where to cut?
First of all, I'd like to comment on the woman who I believe was on the Republican line, stating that she would be willing to take a cut as a senior citizen in her pension or Social Security. I believe she's probably in a great minority, because I'm quite familiar with the voting public, having run for public office myself, and I truly needed the backing of the senior citizens, and there's no way that they would take a cut in their Social Security benefits or whatever else they're getting. My point is that I believe the defense budget is something that needs to be more closely looked at. Obviously, they're using the ploy that we don't want to cut the services because we're in 2 wars, which we are, and we would be putting a negative effect on our troops. Well, I believe that the bulk of the majority of our spending in the area of defense does not go in those 2 areas of Iran or Iraq and Afghanistan. I think most of it is in foreign air bases and foreign in deployment of our troops, and this is an area I believe we need to look at.
All right, Michael, one more here in Miles, Michigan. Is Dave on our independent? Is this Niles, Michigan?
Sure I am.
Dave, we're going to let you go. The vote's over. Thank you.
Mr. Rogers of Alabama. Mr. Rogers of Alabama votes aye. Mr. King of New York. Mr. King of New York votes aye. Mr. Conyers. Mr. Conyers votes no. Mr. Murphy of Pennsylvania. Mr. Murphy of Pennsylvania votes aye. Mr. Gene Green of Texas. Mr. Gene Green of Texas votes no. Mr. Whitfield. Mr. Whitfield votes aye. Mr. Royce. Mr. Royce votes aye. Ms. DeLauro. Ms. DeLauro votes no. Mr. Harper. Mr. Harper votes aye. Ms. Waters. Ms. Waters voted no. Mr. Ackerman. Off aye on no for Mr. Ackerman. Mr. Frank of Massachusetts. Mr. Frank of Massachusetts votes no. Mr. Young of Alaska. Off no on aye for Mr. Young of Alaska.
On this vote, the yeas are 240, the nays are 179, and the previous question is ordered. The House will be in order. What purpose does the Speaker rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to speak out of order for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman will suspend. The House will be in order. Speaker is recognized.
My colleagues, I think a lot of you know that I've always believed that the House works best when the House is allowed to work its will. I think all of you know that we're embarking on a more open process in this Congress, and it'll start today with a consideration of this continuing resolution. I take to the well to suggest to my members that we want all members to be able to participate in the debate here in the House. We also want to keep our commitment to the members to meet the schedule that we've outlined for everyone. That means as we go through the next couple of days, I'm going to ask members on both sides of the aisle to try to bring your amendments together, to try to respect the amount of time that's being taken, so that all members have an opportunity to be heard and to participate in the debate. We've never had an open process for a continuing resolution in our history, and so we're into some uncharted waters. I'm ready to expect whatever. But I do believe that this process is important for all the members, and I want this week for all of us to get started down this road working together so that as we get into the weeks and months ahead, we can show the American people that the House can work together, the House can work its will, and at the end of the day, I think the American people will be better served by our service. I yield back.
Without objection, 5-minute voting will continue. The question is on adoption of the resolution. As many as are in favor will signify by saying aye. Those opposed will say no. Pinning the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, on that I demand the yeas and nays.
Yeas and nays are ordered. As many as in favor of recorded vote are ordering the yeas and nays will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen. The yeas and nays in order. Members will record their vote by electronic devices. It's a 5-minute vote.
Speaker Banner there, setting the scene for the debate ahead. This is the vote on the rule for H.R. 1. That's the fiscal year 2011 spending bill that will fund the federal government from the weekend of March 4th through the end of the year, the end of the fiscal year anyway, end of September. Republican bill would provide $1 trillion in general funds. That's more than $60 billion less than the previous year, nearly $100 billion less than the President requested for fiscal year 2011. Now, the Hill reports that after the 1 hour of general debate that they will begin work on amendments that relate to the Defense Department. After that, writes the Hill, amendments to general provisions will be taken up. Then amendments affecting House Appropriations subcommittees will be examined. In alphabetical order by subcommittee, in rough order, they write that's Agriculture, Commerce, Justice, Energy, Financial Services, Homeland Security, Interior, Labor, State, and Transportation, up to what's likely to be 3 days of debate on the spending bill in the U.S. House. Meanwhile, the Senate is in today continuing work on reauthorizing Federal Aviation Administration programs. The Senate's in recess until 2:15 for their weekly party lunches. They will be back at 2:15 for more debate on the FAA programs bill. They did earlier today cast a vote to approve an amendment to make it a felony to distribute body scan images, the ones at the airport. That in the Senate today. Again, they're back at 2:15, and the Senate
On this vote, the yeas are 242, the nays are 174, 2 voting present, and the resolution is adopted. The unfinished, without objection, the question to reconsider is laid upon the table. The unfinished business is a question on adoption of House Concurrent Resolution 17, which the chair will put de novo. The clerk will report the title of the concurrent
House Concurrent Resolution 17.